I see a lot of people that are starting to come in. Welcome, everyone. Looking forward to the session. We're just going to give people 30 more seconds to join before we kick the webinar off. Okay, let's do this. Thank you everyone for coming and welcome to this webinar where we'll be discussing how you can start preparing for CSDDD. Of course, this is following a lot of work that we at Nordic Sustainability have done on CSDDD together with select clients of ours. Here today is Copenhagen Airports and Ørsted, who will disclose some of the first findings from some of the case studies that we've done together with them on a CSD maturity tool. And we'll take a deeper look into what we found from those first projects and hopefully distill some insights for you that you can learn from in your journey on sustainability due diligence more widely, but also, of course, specifically on CSDDD. One thing before we start. And by the way, I'm Esben. I'm a co-founder and managing partner here at Nordic Sustainability. I'll do a little bit of an introduction to everyone on the webinar in a few minutes, particularly also Elisa and Matthias from Ørsted and Copenhagen Airports, as well as Anna here from Nordic Sustainability. But as we start, I would actually encourage everyone on here to just write your names and the company that you are representing in the chat, so we can see a little bit who's actually here and navigate a little bit in that. That would be great if you could do that. So if we go to here to what we're going to cover here today, we're going to start a little bit on some opening remarks by me. I'll be facilitating the discussion today. It's other people who have all the content to share. And then we're gonna dive into the CSDDD maturity tool and the pilots that we've done, where Anna will share some insights. After that, we have some questions towards Elisa and Matthias on the projects that we've done with Ørsted and Copenhagen Airports, and then we'll wrap up with a Q&A in the end, where you will also get a chance to post questions, so that we can hopefully get an interactive session where you get your questions answered as well. I hope that makes sense. Next slide. Do put questions in the chat, but use the Q&A function, because then it's easier for us to know which ones are actually questions to the experts. So please do use the Q&A function when you post questions, and do it already now, better sooner than later, and then I will make sure that all questions, as many questions as possible, will actually be answered. So please do put that in. Nice. Just a little bit around us at Nordic Sustainability. As I said, I'm a co-founder and managing partner here with a boutique sustainability consultancy that believe that we need to do something about the fact that our current economic system is not working out the way that we wanted it to do. So we really want to help businesses in transforming towards a future where we actually live within the planetary boundaries. So that's our mission and what we start to do. You can go to the next slide, Lynn. And we do that by working with companies across strategy development, reporting, and policy, climate and nature, and also within the financial sector on sustainable investments. And we've done that with a lot of different clients, as you can see on the slide, for now more than almost 8 years. So not that new anymore. And we have a lot of business both in Denmark, of course, but actually more of our business outside of Denmark in Northern Europe. And what we really want to do is unlock the strategic potential of the ESG agenda. We're all about impact reduction, but we also realize that the only way forward on the agenda, particularly given the recent uncertainty, is that we can really unlock the wider benefits of working strategically with sustainability. All right, next slide. So I'm actually, instead of me trying to just capture your resumes in short, Elisa, Anna, Matthias, can I just have you talk about yourself for 30 seconds so that the people know who's actually online? Maybe we start with you, Elisa. Can you just give a brief intro to your work and who you are?
Yes, thank you, Esben, and thank you everyone for tuning in. My name is Elisa. I'm a senior human rights advisor in Ørsted. I sit in a team called Sustainability, Due Diligence and Compliance, and our role is to implement human rights management systems across Ørsted and across our value chain. And hence, we also sit with the CSDDD implementation.
Thank you. Short and sweet. Well done. Anna, you're up next.
Yes. Hello, everyone. I'm Anna, and I'm Senior Specialist and the CSDDD lead here in Nordic Sustainability. And that means I'm responsible for developing our due diligence services and managing the related projects. I've been so fortunate to work together with both Elisa and Matthias on those projects that we are going to learn from today. It's probably no secret that I'm, of course, happy that we now have CSDDD. I acknowledge that it takes time to implement it, but for me, it's more than just compliance. It gives us a common framework, a roadmap of how businesses can do better for people and environment. And now it's, of course, up to us to then put it into action in a way that is meaningful for businesses, but also brings long-term value. And that's essentially why I'm here. And super happy to be here and see so many have signed up and listening in right now. Thank you.
And last but not least, Matthias, up next.
Hey all, happy to be here. My name is Matthias. I'm a senior advisor at the Copenhagen Airports in regards to a broad range of sustainability topics. I'm part of the development team, sustainability development team out here. So as long as anything is strategy or development or implementation of new things, large projects such as CSDDD or CSRD, it's our department that takes care of that.
Great, thank you. And with that, I will hand over to Anna to the first introduction to the CSD maturity pilots that we've been conducting. Anna, do you want to take it from here?
Yes. Thank you so much. I will start with setting the scene with a short introduction to due diligence, and I will warn you that it will be short. If you are interested in the more technical details of due diligence, we have a separate webinar for that is available online. But I will start with just answering the kind of question, what is due diligence? And when we talk about sustainability due diligence in this context, we mean a process. It's a very specific process that enterprises carry out to identify, prevent, mitigate, and account for potential and actual impacts. It applies to impacts across the entire value chain of a business. It focuses on risk to people and the environment, so not only the financial or the risk to the company itself. It is also a process that is integrated or needs to be integrated into the day-to-day of the business operations. So it's not to be confused with the other types of due diligence, such as the legal or transactional due diligence, which typically occurs around specific events like mergers and acquisition. And the process follows a set of internationally recognized steps. That's what we call the 6 steps, and those are outlined in the OECD due diligence guidance for responsible business conduct. And the way it works is that each step in this process naturally leads to the next, and this creates this cycle of continuous improvement, and therefore the process is often illustrated by this wheel that you see on the slide. And here it's very nice because actually this architecture have been incorporated into the CSDDD, the actual directive itself, with corresponding articles that you can also see highlighted here on the slide. And in the same way, when we have built our services, we are also following this structure. So what the previous slide should also already have illustrated to you is that while of course the directive is relatively new, it's from last year, the content isn't entirely new. It builds on these internationally recognized standards and guidelines that we have that dates back to 2011. It's the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, what we also call the UNGPs, and this OECD Guidelines for Multinational Enterprises that also is complemented or was complemented with a more practical guidance in 2016, and that's where we have the wheel from. They are complementary frameworks, and what they aim to do is to promote this common standard for how to work with sustainability due diligence. And there are certain overlaps and integration. So for instance, just to give an example, when CSDDD ask companies to do a risk assessment, the whole methodology comes from these international guidelines. And in fact, it's the same methodology that is also applied in CSRD and the double materiality assessment. So although we have had these standards around for a long time, and they have been, and especially the UNGPs, they have been endorsed by all UN member states. They are not legally binding, and they do not impose enforceable obligation on companies or governments. Over time, I think the limitation of this voluntary approach have become increasingly evident. We have incidents such as the Rana Plaza factory collapse in Bangladesh, alongside a series of other serious human rights and environmental abuses. And that actually helped build the momentum for having stronger binding measures. And as a response, the European Union, they adopted the CSDDD in 2024. It, of course, was as a result of a longer legislative process before that, with the European Parliament starting and filing what we call a motion. So what CSDDD marks is this clear move from voluntary guidelines to what we call hard law. Now I have already addressed some similarities between some of the significant EU legislation that we have and we work with, namely the similarities and links to CSRD and how they're interlinked. And what is key to know is that due diligence is actually central to a broader set of EU rules, either by directly or indirectly requiring companies to implement due diligence. Now I mentioned CSRD, it's also includes the forced labor regulation, the deforestation regulation, the battery directive that enters into force in August, and so on. And these regulations are designed, even if we not always believe so, but they are designed to be interlinked and work together, and also replace the patchwork of different national laws within the EU. Some of you may already have worked with them. It's, for instance, the German Supply Chain Act, the Dutch Child Labor Duty of Care Law, and so on, just to mention a few. It's also, of course, difficult to talk about this without mentioning Omnibus, because Omnibus also proposed some changes to CSDDD, but it's important to also say here that the proposed changes primarily focus on the reporting requirements, so those requirements that fall under the CSRD. The due diligence obligations as such that remain intact, really kind of solidifying due diligence as central role across all these legislations and regulation. And for CSDDD specifically, the scope of in-scope companies are suggested to remain the same. It was already severely watered down during the negotiations. And when we do a quick count, we can see that 95% of the directive's requirement are also expected to remain unchanged. So early and thorough preparation to align is still highly relevant when it comes to CSDDD. That was the short introduction to CSDDD. Now I'd like to change the focus to the services to build kind of to pave the way to talk about these projects and the learnings from them. What we did was that when we started developing this service around 1.5 years ago, we started asking ourselves, how would we do it if we were to implement CSDDD ourselves? And instead of starting head-on with implementation, we know that there are also a lot of various tools out there that can support the implementation. We thought that it would be better to start with getting an overview of where are we now and how can we plan a smart and targeted implementation, because it takes time. So it's also a matter of prioritizing the different steps that you are to go through. And here we identified 3 key steps to take before starting the actual implementation. Those are the steps that you can see highlighted on the slide. And the first is, of course, to start building knowledge and understanding the directive. A lot of the companies that we talk with have, of course, already started this process, and it's also naturally built into our services. It's also something that we experience throughout our projects, that there is really kind of both a wish and a need to upskill across the entire organization. And that's also because due diligence is just not a task that sits with one department. It really needs to be embedded across the operation. Then the next step is to map the current maturity level of existing initiatives, identify the critical gaps, prioritize them, and then make that feed into a targeted and prioritized implementation plan. So those are the 3 steps that we designed our service around. Then, of course, we also wanted to design a tool. And we wanted to design a tool with a range of different features. And the first one was that we wanted to simplify and organize the legislation into digestible pieces of information. Most of you are probably very well equipped and have read a lot of legislation, but it's not necessarily so easy to work with. So we have built kind of an interface that also builds upon the 6th step and is very easy to navigate. Secondly, we wanted to translate all the legal provisions into a set of operational questions. Even though the directive builds upon the international guidelines and the guidance documents, it is a legal text and is not necessarily very actionable or operational. And this is where we spent most of the time actually interpreting, okay, if the legal text says this, what does it then mean in practice? We also often realize that there is some shortcomings to the legal text. We actually had to add additional guidance based on both best practice, previous projects, and what we have worked with, but also referencing other standards and the international guidelines. So even though this tool mainly focused on CSDDD, we have actually built in additional guidance and the references to other frameworks. Then we also wanted to ensure that that also companies look a bit critically at the documentation, because it's actually a separate requirement that companies need to be able to document their due diligence. So it's not enough to have good due diligence processes in place, it needs to also be documented. Then, of course, finally, we also want to provide some insightful analytics, because we know, again, this is not going to take place in a vacuum. It needs to be communicated. Maybe it needs to be communicated upwards to kind of a non-technical technical group. So we also want to build in some dashboards that could quickly summarize the results of the assessment, but also some features that help strengthening or building this implementation roadmap moving forward. While the tool is, of course, very central to our service, it's also important to say that the tool is a part of a wider service package containing various elements. The first kind of, if we look at the deliverables, is of course that clients will get a maturity assessment overview across the key themes and aligned with the 6th step, and then supported by detailed analysis and dynamic dashboards to enable performance monitoring. Then we also provide an executive summary. It's a kind of a non-technical summary where we curate the kind of technical observation even more. And we provide kind of a more strategic view on what are the top 3 recommendations, but also to support effective leadership acting and also making informed decision making. As a part of this process, I'm going to go through a bit more in detail the process later. We also deliver tailored workshops that includes technical upskilling, hands-on exercises, sharing of best practice, and actionable next step to drive implementation. So that even if we in this particular project did not implement a roadmap, there are still some actionable steps that we take out of this that enable the client to move on. And hopefully, what happens as a result is now you can test it with our participants later, our speakers later, but getting a clear overview of the most critical areas to start addressing for an effective implementation, but also kind of inspiration, recommendation, and tangible next steps for how to actually start implementing it, but also overall enable the people at the project management team, at the client, to feel more comfortable in actually starting implementing, because we understand that there is a lot of insecurity around the directive in general. And what we see is that there are overall 2 groups or types of companies that we can help with this service. There are the due diligence starters and the strategic implementers, or maybe some companies that find themselves somewhere in between. But if we start with the due diligence starters, that are organizations with little or no experience in due diligence, I think it's important to say here that even if the company or people feel that due diligence is new as a concept, most companies have already processes in place that are considered due diligence. They are probably just called something else. But companies that then seek kind of a more structured checklist style overview of the CSDDD and really need the directive translated into kind of practical and business operational language. Then we have the other group, we call the strategic implementers, and that's organizations that have some due diligence elements of due diligence process in place already. Maybe they have been working with the international guidelines for years and gradually implementing that want to assess, okay, if we are doing this and this is what we are to do, how far are we for that, and what are the gaps that we need to start addressing? So that's and really also are interested in refining and scaling the due diligence practices strategically. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about what does a process then look like when doing this project with us. The projects that we have done with Ørsted and Copenhagen Airports essentially consist of 2 work packages. The first is what we call a kickoff and scoping exercise or work package. It's not something that is unique for this type of project. It's something that we do across all our projects here in Nordic Sustainability. But in this context, it's essentially for the client to gain a fundamental understanding of CSDDD and also align on the project and involvement. So here, typically, there is a big element of upskilling to kind of a wider group within the company, and also have them understand, okay, now this project is going to happen. What is our role? Then it's, of course, also for enabling the client to conduct the maturity assessment using the tool that we have developed. And this is probably where this project deviates a bit from the more classic consultant delivery, because it's actually the client conducting the maturity assessment themselves. And we, of course, support along the way and a part of that. And then finally, the first step is also for us in Nordic Sustainability to get a fundamental understanding of the client, for also us to be better advisors throughout the project. And the way this works is that we have the project managers on each sides have weekly meeting, and then the kickoff is prepared as a joint session around 2 to 3 hours. Then the next step is what we call the maturity assessment. And this is where there is some work to do on the client side, because the client needs to do the self-assessment on the CSDDD maturity. It's, of course, guided by us. And the way it works is that we have the weekly touch points, and we can answer any both technical questions to either the CSDDD or the tool itself. And then 1 week prior to a workshop, the client sent us the assessment, and then we review it and we summarize some detailed observations as preparation for the workshop. And then we have a workshop where we either go through the detailed observations or we summarize them a bit more, and we do customized exercises. That depends a bit on the target group of those specific sessions. And then, of course, there is a third phase that's not in a part of this project, but that's in this case also for the client to finalize the assessment. We have focused on selected parts of it, and then, of course, roll out and also do the actual implementation roadmap. The last slide, I just want to, before handing over the word to Elisa, I just want to comment a bit on like who's typically involved in this type of projects. And for these projects, we have organized all the client stakeholders into 4 main categories to also ensure clarity in roles and responsibility. In all projects, the project lead has been anchored within the sustainability organization, either in a generalist sustainability function or within a specialized sustainability function. And the role of the project lead is to, of course, have the overall project responsibility, managing the internal project team, but also conducting the self-assessment. So, of course, a lot of workload is on those project leads. And if you have any questions to that, I would encourage you to direct them to Matthias and Elisa, because they can answer much better how it felt actually conducting such a self-assessment. But while, of course, sustainability is the driver of this, a successful implementation really depends on a broad engagement, also because of the nature of due diligence that really needs to be embedded into the organization. So we had a range, and some of those functions are, of course, additional colleagues within the sustainability team, and maybe some functional team is health and safety, procurement, HR, legal and compliance, and finance. And they were placed across core and extended team, depending on their involvement and in the project. And if I should just say one key learning from the project, that is that a broad inclusion is, of course, valuable, especially early on. Also, as I said, there is a big wish and demand for upskilling. But as the project moves on into the more kind of technical workshop, a smaller focus tend to be more effective. So that's a bit how we saw it develop throughout the process. But still, I want to highlight that it's important to keep the broader group informed and engaged, but of course also without overburden them and striking that balance that was critical to the progress. But again, I think you, Matthias and Elisa, they can talk much more to this point if you're interested. But that was everything for me. Now I want to hand over the word to first you, Esben.
Thank you, Anna. Really appreciate it. The way that we've done the next session, maybe we can go to the next slide. Is that we basically just listed a few questions for Elisa and a few questions for Matthias that they can reflect upon. And then we're gonna take it through there. I would also again encourage everyone to add questions to the Q&A. We already have some coming in, but the more the better. So please do that. Elisa, starting with you, if you can go to the questions slide. Yes. So here are some key learnings that Elisa will just talk us through, and then we can take the questions afterwards. Elisa, do you want to go?
Yes, thank you, Esben. And yeah, before I start, I also just wanted to mention that it's been great to have Nordic sustainability as part of the journey. I think we had a lot of sort of questions to the process or some of the things that needed to be further developed, and you've been really accommodating for that. So it's been really a pleasure to do the pilot with you. The key learnings maybe are not really groundbreaking, but I think they can also maybe answer some of the questions that are posted in the Q&A. So just to start, I think we in Ørsted consider ourselves as the strategic implementers. Like, we've done due diligence before, and we keep on doing due diligence now. So it's more about finding the spaces and gaps in our due diligence process that are not covered yet. So that's maybe the sort of how we consider ourselves. One of the key learnings, and that also maybe reflects a little bit the point of time where I came into the organization. It was just a few months before we started the pilot. So finding the key stakeholders for me was taking a lot of time. But it was also very important, both for the pilot, but also for sort of integrating into my role, really. But I think if I should give one good tip, is to start small and then expand your stakeholder landscape. The core group doesn't have to be big to make the first steps, and it's very important just to have the ones that are the closest to the process. Then another key learning is that being a global company means a lot of complexities. And this is also something we discovered through the pilot, because of course the tool is structured in one way, and then you need to take it and make it your own. And what we sort of experience is also that we have different processes also across how we work with human rights, how we work with the environment. Some of them are more complex than others, but also we cover many different technologies. We have the offshore wind, we have the onshore wind, we have solar, we have battery storage, and sometimes we don't have one global process. The processes sit with the teams, and that also needs to be reflected in one way or another, how we go about our due diligence. So it's definitely possible. It can be difficult, but I think adding that granularity really allows for sort of having a better overview of the gaps. Another thing that I've reflected a lot about was that human rights specialists not always speak the same language as the environmental ones. And as you look at the CSDDD directive, it has the language of the UNGPs and the OECD guidelines. And of course, that means that sometimes that doesn't really relate to what our colleagues in the environmental space are doing. So what took me a long time was actually to understand how they work and how I can accommodate for that without using the unnecessary sort of human rights jargon that I speak to. So it's been also like a conversation between the teams that needed to be unfolded, and also for me as a project manager also to make sure that that they can find themselves in that. And here we also had a lot of discussions with Nordic sustainability on sort of how to translate some of the requirements into something that is much more practical and hands-on, and that's been also actually a very good process. And the last one is that the gap analysis is really just the beginning. And through the pilot, we didn't even cover the entire assessment. We sort of, decided to pick on some of the steps or categories just to get started and see where we are at. So of course the work continues. And I think it's also, Anna, you mentioned that before, but the structure of the tool goes beyond the directive. It goes also, like, it speaks into the good practice. It speaks also to the OECD guidelines, the UNGPs, and that also means that omnibus or not, we don't know what will happen with the directive in itself, but it really prepares you for covering the broad due diligence scope. And of course, it takes time. So don't underestimate that, because it's and I think the more complex the organization is, the bigger the organization is, the longer it takes to cover the ground. Yeah, and I think I'll stop here so we can also cover questions.
Thank you so much, Elisa. I had just one question as a follow-up now that we have you online before we go to Matthias, because you touched upon some of the things that are actually coming into the Q&A already, and maybe you can elaborate a little bit on this perspective on how is it as a global player to be working with the CSDDD, and what kind of complexities that you describe are there, because that's one of the questions that we actually have received in the Q&A already by an anonymous attendee, so I can't even mention a name. So maybe, Elisa, you can expand a little bit on that, and then we can move on to Matthias.
Yeah, sure. I think the biggest complexity is that there is no one process. I mean, for some of the sort of, how do we manage, for example, our supply chain? Yeah, that is. But then because we also have our assets across the world, we build big wind farms. That also means that sometimes a lot of the processes are very local. And that's getting overview of that can be a little bit complex, but also it also means that that potentially in the future we can streamline the processes better. So there is the two sides of the coin, and that's also we are doing. That's why we're doing the gap assessment as well, to uncover where can we actually become more streamlined. But definitely it's the technology side of it. So it's the fact that we have different business areas that we need to cover, and they operate in a different way sometimes, but also then the human rights and the environmental part that also is operating in a different way, which makes sense. So there is no one way to go to things. You need to sort of establish a little bit how are the processes right now working, and how can we sort of make sure that through analyzing the processes and the documentation, that we have everything covered that we need.
Thanks a lot. And just real short question for you, Lisa, before we let you go for now. How long did it take to do the assessment, and how did you select your pilot projects?
Yeah, a good question. And so I think the pilot took around 2 months sort of, of work back and forth together with the workshops. We decided to cover the supply chain scope for human rights because that sits with my team. So that was relatively easy in terms of sort of, doing the assessment. And then we could also test the tool in the entirety. And then for the environmental scope, we took only the step 1 and 2 of the due diligence to get us started. Because as I said, it was a little bit more complex to get into the conversation with the environmental teams. And that also meant that we wanted to take it slow and first understand how it all ties together, what kind of process we have, what kind of standards we use, etc.
Thank you. Makes a lot of sense. All right, moving on. Thank you, Elisa. To Matthias. Will you take it from here, Matthias?
I will. Hey all, again, happy to be here. First, a little disclaimer, I'm struggling a little bit with my allergies today. So as I sniffle and sneeze my way through this, I do apologize in advance. I think to start where Elisa started as well, I think we're somewhere, realistically speaking, in between the roles Anna listed, a starter and an implementer. I think especially on human rights and the S topics, there's a lot of precedence for how to do these kind of things, but there's a lot more work to be done on some of the E topics for us. We have a lot of focus on it locally, but less focus like the more you move out in the value chain, right? So those are some of the challenges for us are related to those issues. Some key findings here. Yeah, the slide is on some key findings. The most immediate takeaway, I think, is that the tool is for sure, and for us, have been a time saver. Something we learned through our first year of CSRD reporting was that it takes an immense amount of time to just sort of like, we call it translating, but to just fully understand the directive and the wants, needs, and objectives, and translating them into like a more local company language and things that you can to work with, not only being a CSRD expert, but being an SME located in different departments across the company. We saw the same thing was going to be an issue for us with CSDDD. So for us, a lot of time has been saved with the tool allowing for a very simple overview and a very quick overview. It's something that we do ourselves normally, but the amount of time we've saved is immense. So that's the first immediate takeaway, is that it skips some of the tasks you'd have to do internally before even getting to the real work, and that's been very helpful for us. I think the most immediate challenge we've come across is that there's a company-wide exhaustion. There's more question. Just getting past, like I said, our first year of CSRD reporting has taken a lot of resources, and now there's more work to be done with a large directive coming our way. And I think what we've learned here is that for now, I think we're allowing a little bit of hibernation in terms of like talking directives and implementation of them, and working a little bit in the shadows, I'd almost say. So CSRD has led to a lot of projects being started, especially in terms of documentation and data for sustainability topics. And I think what we're doing right now is trying to, without talking too much straight up regulation, directive and CS3D, we're trying to sort of work some of the things we know now based on the pilot needs to be done into those existing projects. And I think that's been a key thing for us to sort of allow everyone to relax a little bit before we really start talking about compliance again. So that has at least been an immediate learning for us, and a way that's worked for us. I think the biggest challenge we've come across is that we've realized how complex our company is, not just commercially, but in regards to something such as sustainability data, especially. And I think what we've learned is that we can't really look at something like CSRD or CS3D from like a one-time company-wide perspective. We have to sort of segment the work or divide it into different business formats. So speaking from an airport perspective, we have a shopping mall, we have aeronautical activities, we have ground operations that are very complex as well. And there's a whole lot of other legislations that we're subject to. Our whole operation and expansion is based on national legislation. So there's a lot of different perspectives that has to be sort of dealt with separately in terms of like setting up the proper due diligence framework to deal with all this incoming legislation. So that's really a key learning for us, that company structure complexity. I hear Elisa talk about that in terms of the global perspective, but just operate on the operational side as well. Larger or higher level degree of company complexity equals larger or higher level of CS3D complexity. And then the sort of a positive takeaway, very much based on the learnings from the pilot, is that as a company that has already reported for the first year of CSRD, there's a lot of synergies to be found here, but not only in regards to CSRD, also in regards to classic ERM structures in the company. And this is something that's a key focus for us, is to try to rethink all of these processes and think them like in a smart way, make sure that they work and interact with each other, so that we don't have like a classic ERM risk structure. We have a DMA process, and then we have adverse impacts processes next to that. We want to make sure that those synergies are taken advantage of, and they're thought together in a smart way. I think that's the most positive takeaway. The synergies there have a huge potential. Yeah.
Thanks, Matthias. We also have a few questions coming directly to you, so I'm just going to cover at least one of them now. We have a question that's around how many human rights did you actually identify as part of the IBHR as risk that you could be at risk of causing or contributing to at Copenhagen Airport. If that's something you are comfortable in sharing, that's perfectly fine. But of course, I also know that there's a limit to how much detail you can go into.
Yeah, I'd love to take that separately, but I can't expand on that number-wise at least. And also a quick disclaimer perhaps is that we've only I can understand that Elisa might be through with the pilot at Ørsted, but we're about 2/3 in, I'd say, Anna, something like that, right? So there's still work to be done within the pilot, and apologies that I can't expand on that too much. Yeah.
No, that's all good. That's all.
Maybe I can also comment a bit here, because I see we have a lot of questions in the Q&A regarding the risk assessment and how it's done, and questions to that. I think it's important to say here that as a part of this project, we do not conduct the risk assessment as such. We evaluate kind of the existing risk assessment as a part of the due diligence, and assess that up against the requirements. So it's just important to say that's a little bit of a different focus that we have in this type of project.
Okay, we can now officially start the Q&A. And I think I actually want to start us off with maybe a little bit the elephant in the room. That of course, bless you, Matthias. Of course, there are some uncertainties in relation to the political landscape that we are facing. I think Matthias already beautifully talked a little bit to that we as a field of sustainability professionals, of course, have to navigate a little bit of a different scenario now, where we cannot only argue in terms of compliance, right? And of course, there's also uncertainty with regards to CSDDD. I know both you, Anna, and Elisa, I don't know about you, Matthias, have some opinions about that. What is the status of the CSDDD regulation and generally speaking, human rights, sustainability due diligence? So maybe Anna, you can lead us off in terms of your thinking with regards to the uncertainty that is unfolding at the moment.
Absolutely, it's of course a question that we get a lot, and I think also one of the things that I always want to discuss, I think with the Omnibus, I think there's a little bit of a misperception also out there, because it's true that the Omnibus has been very, very harsh to CSRD and the reporting requirements in the sense of the suggested proposed changes, and it's not, I'm not here to challenge them or not, but actually when we and of course I also want to acknowledge that there have been suggested some quite interesting and significant changes to CSDDD, but when we do kind of, as I also said, do this count of how many proposed changes are there? Actually, 95% of the requirements, or the breakdown of the requirements that we have in the tool, remain untouched. Of course, then it's open to then political negotiation. But if the standpoint is that the Commission takes the most extreme point of the negotiation, then I think there is still relevant to prepare. But now that is compliant, as I also said, one thing is compliance. What we also hear a lot is companies are already working with the international guidelines and wish to continue with that. Of course, it's to make a change in the world, but there are also all the potential business how can you say, benefits to have it and to focus on. And that I think is often overlooked with good reasons, because there has been a massive focus on compliance, and there is a fatigue, and I completely understand that.
And how about you, Elisa? Do you want to comment as well?
I think in Ørsted, we follow the international guidelines. We have the UNGPs and we see the guidelines spelled in our human rights policy, and this is something that we've worked with for a long time. So I think obviously it would be great to have that as a legal requirement, because it adds to the importance. I think, you know, everyone experiences that, you know, when you look at sanctions, it's just you know, there is no discussions. With you know, the more sort of soft law requirements, sometimes you can be internally challenged, or there might not be a budget for certain things. But I think from our perspective, the requirement does not only come from the legal point of view, but also, for example, from our lenders. So we meet the expectations also from other sides, not only from the legal side, and that also means that we do need to be able to prove how do we conduct our due diligence, and besides that, that's also part of being a responsible business, and we still do have an ambition to be one. So I think there are many good reasons to focus on your due diligence practice.
Thanks a lot. I want to touch upon kind of a more broad question. There's some different questions in the Q&A that are around how to integrate different stakeholders. So one is, how do you also integrate stakeholders at the local level, not just at the group? So that's on the one hand side, and then also there's some question around how do you actually engage with the C-suite on this. I know it's still early days in this project, and maybe there's not a lot of experience there, but maybe there is some thinking towards these two aspects that you can share with us. So I don't know, Matthias, Elisa, if you have some thoughts there.
So what was the first part of the question? The C-suite and then stakeholder management?
Then stakeholders also locally, not just at the group level.
I mean, I think Lisa is better fit to ask in regards to like more than the local perspective, because we're such a local company with all our operations being gathered here. Yeah, but I think it's very important, but I think this is best practice and good practice in all larger companies, that of course the leadership of the company is heavily involved already from the beginning, especially also in terms of the omnibus discussions. And I think in regards to that, we don't care too much about the omnibus discussion, to be quite honest. I think everybody is highly involved from the beginning, and this is something that we see as an opportunity to further qualify our work with sustainability in a broader sense, especially on the data and documentation side. So I think we're heading in that direction regardless, and this is something that the leadership is heavily involved with as well, you know, in a broader sense. Yeah.
Great. Do you want to comment, Lisa? Should we move on?
I can maybe just comment briefly in terms of the C-suite. We are currently working also on the new human rights governance. I can't talk much into it, but that would also mean integrating some of that and anchoring some of the responsibilities relatively high up. On the stakeholder, I think I touched a little bit on that. For the pilot, we really gathered a small group of people, and this will be expanded as we sort of move along with the implementation part. And this is a little bit intentional also to make sure that we can actually progress. But obviously, colleagues that are based locally are also very important in the equation. So they should not be forgotten. I think it's just that sometimes making your conscious choices and decisions when in the process are they involved.
Perhaps just a quick comment to expand on that as well. And I think my last talking point in regards to synergies. I think most larger companies as well has very established ERM structures already to deal with risk. The risk term is not a new term for the C-suite level people. And I think the more work you put into thinking about those and working with those synergies and thinking these processes together, I think will be very beneficial in the long run in terms of having the right governance structure surrounding these processes, right? Yeah.
That's some good points here. Thanks for those. Here's maybe a little bit of a tricky question. There's also some questions in the Q&A about the cost of compliance here. And given that it is very early on and this is a maturity screening that we're done, then of course I don't expect that you've mapped out all CapEx and OpEx investments here. But do you have any thoughts on that and how to go about thinking about what will actually the cost of compliance be for CSDDD for your organizations?
I mean, I can maybe start. It's not like we have a calculation or a number or sum really, because like you say, Esben, is very early in the process, right? But I think the work we are hiring in regards to raise the requirements from CSRD and now CS3D. But like I said earlier, I think we've realized as a company that there's a lot of value to be caught in regards to, especially on the data and process end. So in regards to those specific topics, we're hiring and then solving the CSRD and CS3D compliance along the way there. But we don't have a specific sum. But especially on the data end, we're spending a lot of resources. Yeah.
Thanks, Matthias. And I think we're almost at the final question. Maybe over to you, Anna. Maddie is asking, how exactly do you involve stakeholders? Do you do surveys, meetings, focus groups? What does the involvement look like? I'm thinking that maybe you, Anna, can get back on that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's important here to say that stakeholder involvement is a requirement under the due diligence for each of the steps. So when implementing due diligence, that needs to be thought in. What we do here in the process is not necessarily on the implementing stage. We are just, as you can say, assessing the current state of the business. So here we rely solely on internal stakeholders for that, to assess what are the processes in place and how well do they match or align with the expectations from the directive and additional standards. And as said, what we do in the process is that we have these collaborative workshops, and then of course there is a great deal of work on the project manager to also reach out internally in the organization to confirm what are the processes that we have at play. I think this is extremely crucial because due diligence is so embedded in the organization, especially you have a complex organization like the two cases we have here. That's also, as you mentioned, Elisa, a very time consuming task to do that work. So that's how it's done in the project specifically, if that was the question. Yeah.
Thank you, Anna. I think we have 1 minute left. I wanted to just ask Matthias or Elisa if you have any final remarks that you wanted to share before we wrap up the webinar.
I don't think so, no, from my end at least. Yeah.
Sounds good. Then I just wanted to thank the both of you very much for spending the time with us. Same goes for Anna, of course. Thank you for sharing your insights. And to everyone who joined here today, really appreciate it. We will share a link to a recording of the webinar, as well as slides from today with everyone in the group. And do feel free to just reach out if you have any questions, either to me or to Anna. We're happy to answer any questions that you might have if you're interested in this topic. And of course, we're really looking forward to rolling out more of these projects and learning more. So thanks, everyone. Really appreciate it. And also thank you to everyone who's joined here today. Have a wonderful rest of the day. And we are 12:00, so let's wrap it up. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Take care.